Hello, my name is William James. I'm the host of the Bald Book Geek. All of my links are in the doobly-doo. How are all of you? Before we get going, be ready to like, comment and share. And if you want to add to this discussion, please do, because I appreciate your opinions and your comments and your shares. It actually means a lot to me as a content creator. Not just because it helps the algorithm, but I actually am interested in what you have to say, unlike a lot of people on this platform. Hi. Classics. Classics are one of those things that seems to get ripped apart by people who don't really understand them. And I've picked up on that. Why, I will agree, reading Shakespeare isn't as fun as watching, because Shakespeare is a script and you're not really meant to read it, you're meant to watch it. Other classics are so important, and to see them dismissed, predominantly by people within the book community online, kind of makes me feel very sad. I see a lot of tweets and a lot of people going, well, classics don't matter, classics are problematic, classics are hard to read, classics are this, classics are that. And the one that really icks me is when people go, well, classics don't matter. And to people who say that out loud, you are wrong. There is no discussion on that subject. You are completely and utterly wrong. And your ignorance is appalling. The reason classics matter is they are the fundamentals of literature. Without these classics, we wouldn't have what we have now. And classics, we can go back in time, and classics aren't that far away. In the big scheme of things, there's not that many decades between current literature and classics. You have classics that were written in the 90s, classics that were written in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, all the way back to a few thousand years before the birth of Christ. So, the fundamental canon of Western literature is so important, and it's so tragic that they get pushed aside. If people are unwilling to try and understand them or sit down and read, and predominantly it's people who are my age and read nothing but YA saying this, easy to consume modern pulp books, the classics, you must at least try. I don't care at the end of the day. If you find something, and also this debate, oh, classics are problematic. Like, no, just because you find something, and I hate the word, it's a corporate get-out clause used by feeble people, problematic, doesn't mean everyone else does. And shaming people for not finding the same issues you have, or saying you must acknowledge them to enjoy them. Oh, shut up. I have no time for your ignorance. I have no time for you. But yeah, these books form the fundamental canon of Western literature. They are a snapshot into a different era. How many retellings of the Odyssey and the Iliad have there been? How many current novels are based on that? They are some of the oldest books, written stories in existence. The Canterbury Tales, William Shakespeare, Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters. You have this list of great writers that push the envelope. I mean, the Bronte sisters were very controversial. And then, Austen, for example, is just a phenomenal writer that really showed a lot of stuff. And again, how many retellings, how much of this is the same literature we're reading now, just in a different form? And it's important. This is important. Without these books, we wouldn't have what we have now. Saying that they don't matter, saying that you shouldn't read them or you find them complicated, is stupid. It genuinely is stupid. It defines... You are losing the fundamental point of literature. Books are there to challenge you. Reading hard books, hard subjects, are there to challenge you and educate you. You're there to see a different viewpoint, a different time, a different history. Be it even more recent classics such as To Kill a Mockingbird, I still think is fundamentally one of the most important books ever written, because we seem to be repeating history. But that's a whole different video. At the end of the day, these books fundamentally are the backbone of every book that we read. And when I see people screaming that they can't read them or they don't want to read them, dismissing them offhand, dismissing them as if they are unimportant, you really need to realize that in decades to come, most of the books we read now will be forgotten. And it will be people like Bronte, Harper Lee, that are remembered. I know that people rant about Catcher in the Rye, and honestly, Catcher in the Rye, and most people don't actually, honestly, people don't like it because it's a teenage boy. That is how the teenage male brain works. We are all ego trips. Classics matter even if you don't think so. Even if you choose to dismiss them, a classic novel is as important as the current book, as the current hot YA mess that you are loving and enjoying and going, oh, this is the best book ever and the cover's amazing, without crediting the cover artist. By the way, the writers have no say in those. Without these classics, without this list of work, of literature going back thousands upon thousands of years, we wouldn't have what we have now. Be it classic science fiction, Frankenstein, for example, Dracula, classic gothic horror, as we move through into this realm of H.G. Wells and these just phenomenal writers that exist within this little bubble, that exist within this little world. When you read a classic, you aren't only experiencing a different time, you're seeing a different world, you're seeing a different point in history. You are seeing people's points of views and feelings and how people interacted. Anna Karenina, for example, is stunning. The Russian classics, Dr. Zhivago. Okay, that's a newer classic, but that's still a classic, and that's a very wordy book, and I warn you, that's one that I prefer as an audiobook just because of how it's structured. But even classic fantasy, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, the Conan books. Do you know how much those two, Lord of the Rings, the Tolkien work, and the Conan books, are the fundamental backbone of modern fantasy novels? So all the YA fantasy that you think is amazing is literally based on those. Classics matter. We need to preserve them, read them, enjoy them, and love them. The more books are falling into the public domain, and it's amazing. Books like The Great Gatsby, a beautiful look at the 1920s, a beautiful look at the flappers and the Jazz Age. At the end of the day, just because you think something doesn't matter, doesn't mean you're right. Just because you find something complicated, just because you don't agree with the book, doesn't mean you're right. At the end of the day, all opinion is opinion, and it's worthless.